and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann, also known as H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal, also known as Q.
I was tempted going into that to do the AKA H, but then I realized that, that would all kind of flow together as being one big acronym.
Yes.
Be like a Ka and a CAC would be the two of us at that point.
I think I would rather be a Ka in that scenario.
Yeah. I understand how that can be mispronounced in ways that aren't advantageous to you.
Certainly.
Before we get started today, we wanted to give a shout out to NinjaBear777, who gave us a really nice review on iTunes. You know, we're always looking out for any kind of fan feedback, be that positive or constructive. And Ninja Bear mentioned that I shouldn't assume gender. Any bear of any variety
Absolutely
can be a ninja. Who are we to judge?
Exactly.
But anyways, yes, mentioned that that this particular Ninja Bear was a listener to Cane and Rinse and Sound of Play, which I also work with a couple of other podcasts that I'm a part of, and came on over to this new show at the recommendation of probably myself and some of the teammates on our other shows there, and has been enjoying the show so far. And it's a very nice post. We very much appreciate it and want to prompt anyone. We're still a very new podcast, and we're still trying to form our audience and all of that. And these iTunes reviews really do help boost our visibility to people who aren't listening yet. So thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and the Ninja Bear review also reminded me that, I know we've created a podcast where we're pitching game ideas at each other, and they seem more baked, probably sometimes than they really are. But I think what Ninja Bear had said in the review is that they did not have an idea for a game yet. And so maybe you're in that phase, right? You're not ready to write into the show with an idea. In the meantime, how you can help is leave us one of those reviews on Apple Pod.
Or alternatively, I was emailing with Sam, who submitted our idea for security last week, the third game on last week's show. He was saying that he was going to share the show with some of his friends, which is immensely helpful. And, there are like selfish motivations. Like, we want to see the work that we put into this appreciated by more people, sure. But like also sharing this with more people actually in a way that not a lot of other shows do, like that makes this a actually better show, because the more people that write in, the more different perspectives and the more different life experiences the community submitted ideas are going to draw from. And it's going to give us a much, much broader canvas to paint on, more than, the two of us could ever bring to the table. And so we really want to hear from everybody from every walk of life. So sharing with friends, sharing with people that you encounter online will make the show better for everyone, ultimately.
It's true.
Enough of the self-promotional type of stuff. Let's get to some game ideas. We're going to hop right into this. Q, what are you bringing us today?
Well, I went for dark sci-fi weird last week, so I thought I would flip the script and tell you about this idea. So it's kind of Stardew Valley meets a drum machine. Imagine, Ryan, if you will, that the world one day wakes up and there is no music. There's nothing that plays music. There's no musical instruments. And you're a small farmer that grew up on this farm with magic soil. And the magic soil makes your fruits and vegetables sing. And essentially what you have is you plant fruits and vegetables and all these things that you can plant in these little gardens that are grids, or these farm patches, if you will. And the grids act like a drum machine. So placing, for example, to use a vegetable, beets, you can plant a beet into small a grid, if you will, so it's kind of X by Y, and you plant a beat into different slots, and you create patterns, and those create music, and then you use your tape recorder or something to record the music and bring it to people in the village to kind of solve quests and unlock new things to plant and be able to create ever increasingly complex and elaborate compositions on a bigger and bigger farm bed.
All right, interesting. Well, I'm very excited to talk about this one. Let's go ahead and start the clock there and see what we come up with. The first thing I like to do whenever I hear a new idea is try to kind of like pull together all of my random thoughts and try to like find some sort of a grounding in games that already exist, not in a reductionistic way, like, oh, somebody's already done it and they've done it better, but like in a way to just give us at least some sort of like common ground
Yes.
to speak with, because in the abstract, it can be very abstract. But I'm getting a bit of a sense of ooblets, which Double Fine showed at this E3, which is kind of like a farming simulator / Pokemon type game where you grow vegetables and fight them against each other. And then also a little bit of Sound Shapes, that 2D platformer from years ago in which you platform around these levels to kind of assemble little bits and pieces of songs that end up kind of adding up to something greater in the end there. But I really like this idea. It's interesting, and especially the visual interface is a really brilliant idea because, these like sequencers are all grid based. You send the sequencing line from left to right and they trigger the notes in each row. And then of course, farms plant their crops in rows as well. So I can already like see in my mind how this works exactly. And I kind of love that.
Yeah, that was the intent. And, I had said to you before the show, I thought you would like this idea. I know that the only better way is I could get some Kinect integration into this thing for you. But
yeah, that's right.
I certainly love the idea of even being playful with some of the things. For example, if, fruits kind of have a tropical soundscape to them or, trumpet mushrooms are actual trumpets.
Yeah, kind of like being playful about it in the way that the like Plants vs. Zombies devs are really playful about like adding like pun functionality into all their plants.
Right, because kind of something works like, the analogy of it, because of course it does. Yeah. So another way I was thinking of, because in sequencers you have sometimes, a musical loop, whether it's a piano riff or guitar riff or something. And so just like you have the analogy with plants, certain plants you can't plant too close together to each other. So you could have plant types that take up, a beat space before and after them or multiple. So you only kind of space out loops as appropriate.
And you can even think about a soil rotation. Is that what it's called? Where like certain plants will kind of like use up the nutrients of a soil. And so you have to kind of like leave it for multiple seasons and then come back to it later. And so you could have some plants that are useful, but they make the space that they're placed in kind of unusable for the next however many rounds that you're going.
I do also, I'm attracted to the concept of you having to maintain these things also just as plants, because like your song can then get sort of sour or sick in the way that like a good song can go out of key or something like that.
I've not admittedly been exposing myself to a lot of the more advanced farming games, like, Farming Simulator on one end, and then a little bit more casually like Harvest Moon and Story of Seasons and all these kind of like that popular genre of farming games. And so I don't really know the mechanics of how to make caring for plants interesting. I've seen it done in the like Plants vs. Zombies mini games where you just have to water a plant when it's thirsty and then just kind of leave it for a while. But from my experience and from my understanding of plants, it seems like a rather passive and slow activity. So how do you make caring for plants interesting on like a moment to moment basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the watering mechanic for sure. I think it's going to be more about, I don't know if you've played Stardew Valley, but the game sort of starts with a fairly messy farmland filled with sort of rocks and debris, almost a la a very extreme version of what you find kind of at the beginning of Viva Pinata, even.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
So I think that there would be some aspect of whether or not there's sort of time per day you're allowed to invest, so you're always kind of managing what to water, what to take care of versus what not to. Or if you want to go less simulation, then you could do things like you're constantly getting better farming equipment. That's just kind of unlocking new land and, more space to experiment. Because I think this game is not necessarily about like you're completing the quests only to get the tools a la Mario Maker, right? It's about the music people are making and hopefully some mechanism to share them with each other in the community.
We could talk about the farming aspect all day, but one thing I'm really curious about is this kind of second aspect that you brought up, about sharing this music with the people in town. And I'm curious to hear like how this would work, like whether there would be, like the farming games, the Stardew Valleys and the Harvest Moons are kind of famous for their village interactions as well. And almost having like relationship management and, meeting villagers and having village events and getting married to villagers, like that type of like social interaction. How do you incorporate the music into all of that?
Or to your earlier point, the way to make you have a bunch of fun because taking care of plants is boring. What I'd like to see in my mind, I imagine the town is sort of a super abbreviated version of all different places on Earth where like different music styles come from. And maybe there's, the villager who he loves a good bossa nova beat, and there's the jazz villager, and these are the people that, you're producing something that has a beat pattern that maybe there are hints on how to achieve throughout the town and, throughout signage or whatever, or throughout what they say. I'm looking for a ba-da-ba-ba-da or something. But to kind of introduce those different sort of beat styles, of course, this is going to be great when I get to the hip hop villager and things like that.
This idea of music being like removed from this world is so interesting. And I'm curious, it could kind of go in two directions. One could be like the music has like magically disappeared from the world, and some sort of like supernatural force has just removed all music and all memory of music from the world, and these people are just like kind of hollow because they know that they're missing something to enrich the soul, but they're unable to fathom what that could be, and so they have to kind of like reconnect with the natural world to rediscover that music. Or alternatively, it's the Footloose or 2112 approach where music is being like censored by the powers that be, because, the frivolity is keeping the people from working hard and so, in that way, like that would be, because you are going back to the natural world to kind of reclaim music, that would be like a nice subversion of the like big kind of government trying to keep you down type of motif.
Yeah, I think I skew in my head, it skews more towards kind of half and half, where music is gone, but these villagers all remember it, but only you are capable of producing it, right? So bringing them back the sort of music that they love. And maybe you could go really specific, like, I need music for my shop, or we need music for the hotel elevator. Like, everybody knows what elevator music sounds like in their head. And being able to do stuff like that, if we got more time with it, and I know we're coming up against it, I'd really love to think about how like the computer can kind of check/accept your submission of music as being valid.
Well, actually, let's think about that, because I think that anybody who studies music theory has like a basic understanding of, each genre does have different note structures and, keys that the songs are composed in, and, whether the rhythm is syncopated or on the beat and all these things. And so, maybe, that might be a little bit too much to ask from every player to compose like an actual jazz song to meet the jazz criteria. But if there were like different beans and vegetables and fruits that you can plant that could like lend you a syncopated sound or a plucked bass, plucked upright bass.
Sure.
For
or different parts
certain...
of your farm that kind of produce, like make the same vegetables produce different sounds.
I'm really interested to explore this one more, but like you mentioned, we are coming up against that time limit. So
them are the rules.
So let's close the book on that one for now. This is one that I am actually like really excited about. And so I kind of want to hear if our community has any suggestions as to where to take this, or any thoughts as to what this would look like or sound like or play like. Like, this is something that I want to hear from everybody. So please do get in touch with us on Twitter at PlaywrightCast, or, give us an email, playwrightcast@gmail.com, and give us some of your thoughts. And we'd love to continue this conversation. But as of right now, this one needs a name. What are you going to call this?
Oh, I couldn't resist. Beet Farm.
Yeah, that seems about right. Next comes my idea here. And this is one that, so far, other than last week, that one was just one that I kind of came up with off the top of my head one day, and I thought it'd be fun to share. But so far, I've been kind of sharing ideas that I've been stockpiling for a while now, things that have, come to me over time, and I just couldn't rattle them from my brain. They've always been kind of playing around back there. But today's kind of like the big one. Today's the one that I've been really excited about ever since the beginning of the podcast to share this one. I would like to preface up front that I am aware of the Gex games, and that this does ride a little close to that line.
Oh, I've just become extremely excited.
But I hope you'll forgive that, because I think you'll find that the similarities to Gex are necessary. Let me introduce this world where you play as a chameleon who lives in like a Steamboat Willie type of world, a kind of old-timey cartoon, and you're just whistling along, having your good day working at the factory or wherever it is that this chameleon works. And all of a sudden one day you wake up and find that the world around you is disappearing. It's being overcome with this dark void that just kind of like eats away at the space around you, that is, in this case, called obscurity. This chameleon, who this is the only life that he's ever known, must venture out past his own backyard, really, into the broader world of inside of the television, essentially. Again, I'm aware of Gex. But what I want to pitch right now is a 3D platformer that all takes place on just one big open world, not broken up different little levels like Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64, but one big open world with all sorts of platforming challenges scattered all throughout. But the interesting thing about it, the thing that the hook of this particular game, is that instead of changing levels, going into different levels to explore different things, you are given the ability to collect different channels that you can change your world to, and that affects all of the world all at once. In place of a level, you would get a new channel at one point, and these can be, everything from like the horror channel to the anime channel to the, Ren and Stimpy type channel, all these different TV channels, these filters that can be applied to the world. And basically the world operates in the logic of the genre that's being applied to it, whether it's like hospital soap operas or Baywatch type shows or, 80s crime dramas or whatever, like all of these different genres. The NPCs would all act like they were characters in these types of shows. And even the platforming challenges would be solved by basically applying these different filters, these different channel filters to these kind of set pieces, where if you want to get to a higher platform, then, maybe the branch that you're standing on would be bouncy in the cartoon channel. And so you can change it to the cartoon channel and bounce up high, and then change it to the anime channel and get rocket boots or something. And so basically you're just you're changing the world more than you're changing your own character in a way. And I want to make him a chameleon because I kind of took that inspiration from a Woody Allen film called Zelig, where he plays this person who has this like mental condition where he just kind of takes on the characteristics of whatever is going on around him, and comes to find that he doesn't really have that strong of he doesn't know who he is outside of being able to like define himself by what's happening around him. And so it's kind of hoping to like explore that same, all of these video games and all of like fiction in general is all about finding out like who our character is when pushed to extremes. And what if the answer was like, maybe the character isn't anything. Maybe the character is just a reflection of the world around him. Like, what would that mean for a story? But the most interesting thing that I hope we'll spend most of the time talking about is the kind of mechanical aspect of this game. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. Let's go ahead and start the clock on that one.
All right. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. I don't know if it was knowingly or not, but this reminds me a lot of a movie I loved when I was a little kid called Stay Tuned. Do you know this movie?
I haven't seen that one, no.
Okay, so it's a John Ritter, like Dad Saves the Kids movie, but it is in the style of these kids get a giant TV delivered to their house, and then they're sort of all sucked into it, and channels are changing, and thus is their reality
cool.
from place to place. And the mechanics, I'm on the mechanics side, you're kind of talking about a reverse Mega Man X, right? Where like he is changing into very distinct states versus the world is changing. So I think that in my mind, that's almost what I see. I guess it's more Mega Man Legends or something because it's in a 3D space. But the way, there'll be sort of shields with one particular ability or the ability to sort of phase through things in another Mega Man ability. I could imagine your own character. Yeah, it's almost like I'd love to be able to mix and match. Can I be like anime guy in hospital world, if that makes any sense?
The arc of his character is that he's just kind of reacting to what's happening around him. So I was thinking more kind of like... in Conker's Bad Fur Day, he goes to the horror world and becomes Van Helsing. And I feel like he'd have to be reacting to what's happening instead of taking his own volition.
I wonder how we create a system, because it would strike me that we're going to hit parts of the game where I'm trying to reach like a new place. And I either have to cycle between realities until I just find the right one. Versus like maybe there's certain characters from some realities kind of always exist in a certain situation to show you that, hey, this might be a good time to switch over to the horror movie because you can have bat wings and fly up or something.
That's kind of the difficult thing about this, and what I kind of want help with this on is that in The Legend of Zelda, for example, you have all these different tools and items that you can use to progress in these dungeons, and they're all telegraphed. Like the item has one or two distinct uses, and you can always tell, when you want to use Twilight Princess's spinner, there has to be a spinner track in the wall. And every time you see a spinner track on the wall, that communicates that you need to use the spinner.
Right.
And but all of these things are kind of like tools that Link is using, and I want some level of like the world necessitates change, and our character is the one who isn't changing, or is, to a lesser extent changing.
They're not
like,
necessarily empowered by the change.
Yeah, but I also don't want just to randomly channel surf, to put it one way, until we find the appropriate solution to every puzzle, because that would be really unfortunate. Like that would just be really it would really slow everything down. There has to be some sort of predictability of cause and effect when you change to a different channel, that you can count on something happening. But I also don't want it to be the same all throughout this giant open world, because at that point, like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So somewhere in between Zelda and The Secret of Monkey Island is where I would find this one.
I think one of the brilliant things about the new Zelda, and maybe we can borrow from it, is they're kind of the chemistry system of people kind of understand metal is kind of magnetized, like water can freeze and that sort of stuff. If it's better to, as opposed to have a very exotic number of channels, which is probably hard to build anyway, have sort of, your 4 elemental, not necessarily elemental, but archetypical channels that someone can predict, like, oh, this is really, there's the one where all the walls are kind of sticky and or there's a space one where I know I can float or move upside down.
Yeah, I guess you could count on like the sci-fi channel, like things that would typically be organic matter would be made out of metal. And so you can have some sort of a magnetized property there.
Yeah.
Or the like weather disaster movie channel would have floods and tornadoes and things that you could use to in certain ways and sort of like physics puzzles like Zelda.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild specifically.
It's a matter of like what the scope is, because it's going to be key that I have the instinct to activate the channel, right? Rather than the kind of old fashioned way like Zelda would like literally put up a sign essentially saying, now's the time to pull this thing out.
Yeah. And so I guess just having like a set number of elements in the world that you kind of have like a good idea of how they react. And so maybe that is the thing, is like it's keeping the number of elements in the world to a manageable amount. And so, you know how bats will react to changing the channel to these certain different channels. And so you can always count on when you see a bat, then you have to assess, okay, I've got these 3 choices. Which one is going to help me right now?
Right.
And then once you get a 4th choice, once you get another channel unlock, then you can think like, okay, I've seen bats, I've seen trees, and I've seen, mushrooms or whatever. Like, what will this new channel do to all of those? And kind of have that like curiosity awaken in your mind.
I also like the idea of maybe decoupling the chameleon power from the channel change, because like a chameleon doesn't necessarily, they can kind of cause themselves to change. Yes. So I don't know if there's like, this is the time where I need to be the weather disaster chameleon in the sci-fi world and vice versa, and be able to say it's really this set of capabilities that I can kind of transform into.
That could be like a good end game unlock, really, to kind of like push you one step further, because, if the entire game is about trying to find your own identity and push yourself out of, what is being fed to you, then the ultimate expression of that would be to just, be whatever you want to be at any given point, no matter what's happening.
I could also see that as a very sort of satisfying ending sequence too, as you're approaching some of the latest challenges. Is like, he's realized he can transform into any of these things at any time because he is the chameleon. All that
It's
stuff.
kind of like mechanical metaphors like you see at the end of Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that I thought about in here is the introduction of like NPCs, people that you would talk to. I was kind of inspired by Deadly Premonition and specifically all of like Swery 65's works in the past, because he tends to introduce what he calls digital actors, kind of casting similar characters with the same names in all of his games, starting from probably Spy Fiction on the PS2. So there will be like a Forrest Kaysen in all of them, who's like a more heavyset white guy with a similar voice actor or whatever. And so I wanted to, since this is kind of a persistent world, I think it makes sense if the characters were also persistent, but they would behave differently and they would have different objectives and different motives in these different environments. And you can kind of like use these different channels to like move them to certain places, or to solve puzzles that way, or to get them to give you a piece of information they wouldn't on another channel.
That's really interesting, because now that kind of makes itself the story and quest structure, right? Which is advancing all of these potential actors' storylines to the end of maybe one or all of their respective channels.
Trying to balance the needs of the same person in different realities, essentially.
and then using maybe their temperament from one reality to kind of get them to do something for you. But you know what? That's great, because I feel like that compounds and feeds into the theme of you are kind of an extra in your life and how you think of yourself, right? You're just kind of going along with whatever's happening. And for the game to be about like helping these other people to maybe they need to help you in the end, like accomplish something, is all part of that great sort of transformation of the character.
A lot of the stories I write are about what if we aren't the one who's making decisions on our own stories, and what if we're pawns being played by some grand chess master somewhere. So yeah,
I am going to take some Advil and lay down.
Let's stop the clock on that one. I don't have a great title for this one yet. I've forgotten to come up with something really amazing.
I wonder if there's something to Colorless and Black and White.
Colorless, Chameleon. Yeah, that's not a bad name. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad. Colorless Chameleon.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's go with that for now. I'm not 100% sold on this title yet, and so I'm hoping that somebody in our community will be cleverer than I am.
Yes, help us.
But let's go with Colorless the Chameleon, title pending.
Much better than Prozac the Chameleon.
Yeah, that one just narrowly won out. So we have one last submission today. This one is a community submission from one of my buddies in real life. This is from Neil Piper, who writes in, "Everyone likes Rocket League. Everyone likes medieval knight games. How about Rocket League meets Dynasty Warriors For Honor?" That is
Whoa.
Dynasty Warriors / For Honor. 2 different games there. Each team gets a castle, which is also their goal. You're trying to knock the giant ball into the opponent's goal / gate using swords, arrows, and maybe magic. The castles are destructible, so it gets easier to score as the battle wages. Each castle has cannons or catapults, so you can launch a critical hit on your opponent's fortification. However, it would be easy to score an own goal trying to get the ball into the launcher, so there's some risk-reward there. Each team gets an army of AI bots to fill out the battlefield as well. Maybe you can get points per kill and lots of points per goal. Q. I have a feeling that you are thinking of the same game that I am thinking of after reading that idea right now.
Ooh, tell me which game you're thinking of, because in my head, this is so weird. I played it only just recently. I'm actually thinking about kind of Overwatch.
Oh, okay. That was not what I was expecting.
Okay. What do you have in your head?
Oh, what I thought we were both going to immediately jump on was Odama for the GameCube, which is a pinball game that is set on like a Japanese samurai warfare field. It includes the GameCube microphone that you would use to kind of like shout orders to your troops to advance to different places in this like pinball table and try to kind of wage these battles and use your pinball skills to help your army progress forward.
Oh, I am seeing gameplay right now. And the podcast is over. I need to go play that game instead. No, this is the reason why Overwatch sprang to my mind is because they did last summer, and I think they might be doing it again. Lucio Ball, which kind of takes these first-person shooter characters and forces them to really compete by scoring Rocket League-like goals on each other. Mm-hmm. But I actually think Lucio is the missed opportunity here. If really wants to be in a fantasy setting, I would love to be a mage and be able to like freeze the ball or set it on fire to like stop someone else from touching it. Every time I hear people talk about like soccer positions, like someone is a striker or something, I always think that sounds very cool. And there should be a literal striker, right? A kind of big burly guy who can really hit the ball very fast, and offensive and defensive, like a hero class game.
The pitch that was given to us by Neil is it feels kind of like like an RTS meets Rocket League, something where you're managing armies, where you're managing kind of the flow of army. He brings up Dynasty Warriors in there, which is a really good shout because that one is like you are playing essentially a character action game, but you're also trying to keep in mind the general flow of the battle across the entire battlefield. And so you're kind of playing a management, a simulation, war simulation game all at the same time, kind of juggling the two very different objectives. And also, it kind of also makes me think of, what is it called? Steven Spielberg's, for the Wii, Boom Blocks. That was it, which is a game all about kind of like Jenga bricks that are stacked in various ways, and a lot of mini games that you play by throwing balls from the Wiimotes or trying to pull the pieces out, or all these different mini games and objectives. And a lot of them had to do with like knocking over the opponent's structures using these kind of like physics simulation blocks. Yeah. What I'm curious about the most, what is the character in this game? I like the idea of this medieval battle going on all around you, but we need to find something that, makes sense in this world, to have this giant, flaming ball rolling down the battlefield and something controlling it as well.
Sure. Well, I mean, in the case of Odama, it almost looks like as though it would have been like a catapult ball or something of that ilk.
What if you are playing essentially like a soccer game on a scale where everything else happening around you is much smaller? Like, what if this is like Black and White, the old games that Lionhead used to put out, where you play as like a giant god who is representing, a civilization of people, and it's you and this other god facing off against each other in essentially a giant game of soccer or football. And then all of your armies are kind of like waging war around your feet, trying to set up traps for the opposing god, or trying to, try to take you down by throwing spears at you. And you can use voice commands to send your armies in one direction or the other, or you could use button commands to issue orders on the fly, but your main intention is to play, soccer, football, and try to knock over the enemy's castle using those mechanics while something else is happening around you.
Yeah, I wonder, now that you've kind of set down that Black and White bandwagon, which I really love, is if there's kind of the soccer matches themselves and a la a FIFA or if you any sort of modern sports games, when you're not actually in a match, you're able to build your town or train your citizens or kind of design your field. And then of course you're kind of like, once the battle has begun, it's almost like the gods decide the fate of the battle, right? So now you can have a true sort of one-on-one competition while still keeping that sort of fantasy theme and feeling like you're doing a lot of on the ground stuff, in between.
This is fantasy football in its truest form.
That's right. Oh man, we may have just named it as well.
Yeah, let's think about what is the idea of what does scoring look like in this case? Because, this is also something we had to think about on our very first episode with that kind of Pong-like idea, is that we have this idea of, Pong, you're supposed to get the ball behind the person's paddle, but if that's not the main objective, if the main objective is just to spread paint, like in that episode or in this episode, to knock over enemy reinforcements and decimate their battle readiness, then what does scoring get us? Why is that a desirable outcome?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the sort of two-fold based gameplay that I was talking about, where during off match times, I'm building and managing the army or the castle and its defensive capabilities on its own. And then it's just, almost like the gods lift up the land that the castles are on themselves and put them into the sky. And then it's, two gods duking it out, castle on castle, and the first, destroyed castle, or badly enough damage, right? Because you have to live to fight another day, is the sort of loser, I suppose.
I think the most fun thing about this is that, battlefields aren't these large, flat, rectangular, football pitches like we would have come to expect from this type of game. But I kind of actually really want to play now a football soccer type of game that is set on a really diverse field with hills and, could even be like 3 or 4 different goals that represent different armies and, trees and pits and rivers and all these things that can get in the way of this game of, of otherwise normal soccer.
Yeah, heck yeah. And I mean, he brought in For Honor kind of at the beginning of this, and it made me think it's really fun too, the way in For Honor you can align yourself with an ancient warrior civilization.
Yeah, and have the clashes of these different, kind of like you would see in Age of Empires or For Honor, like you mentioned, or the Total War games where you can just kind of like pit these armies up against each other.
It is. It's kind of Total War soccer we're talking about, isn't it?
That is also, this is turning out to be one of my favorite pitches. I really like this one.
Yeah, this is a great one. Now I want to play this game.
Let's think about, just for fun, what would be an end game really challenging course? Like, what if the battlefield is like on, or each castle is on one side of like giant crevasses that you would have to kick the ball over, and you'd have to really aim it while, other gods are trying to steal the ball from you or something.
Yeah, and I think maybe even, let's say, okay, if I run with that idea of the land and the castle actually being lifted up into the sky, if you have the ability to defend your castle with traps and moats and that sort of stuff, making it that much harder to actually, get a hit in, kind of designing your own defense space around your thing. So you have the landscape and whatever sort of traps and concoctions you've come up with.
Cool. Well, let's call this one. Neil originally pitched the name Swords and Scorcery, which is pretty funny.
Pretty
I
good.
appreciate that one. It sits pretty close to the Super Brothers game, Sword and Sorcery EP. But that is a clever name. I do like that. I also like fantasy football, which we were tossing around before, because it's kind of, different directions it went in the creation process. But I think both are excellent names. Thank you very much, Neil, for submitting that. And if any of you, the listeners, we would love to hear from each and every one of you, your own ideas. They don't have to be as elaborate as Neil's was. If you just have, something as simple as like a shirt ironing simulator, then like we'll take that.
Oh, yes,
and we'll
absolutely.
see where we can go with that. We'll see, we'll find ways to gamify it and codify the score system or whatever, just feel free to give us something that is as elaborate or as simple as you want. And you can send each of those to playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can send it to our website. That is www.playwrightcast.com/pitch. And that is, of course, spelled PLAYWRIGHTECAST.
It's
or
true.
You can get in touch with us on Twitter @playwrightcast.
And a special thank you to Protodome, whose our theme song "Hello World" is off his album Blue Noise. Go check that out on Bandcamp.
Some excellent chiptune work there, and definitely worth a check out. Some of his music is free as well, so can't object to that. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you next week.